Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Scrutiny Committee tonight. We only have one presenter, no portfolio holders, I'm sorry to say. We have, rather than, I'll just introduce you now, but it's Ian, is it Joinson? From West Kent Housing. But otherwise, there are no fire drills planned. If the fire alarm is activated, which is a continuous siren with a flashing red light, please leave the building immediately, followed by the fire exit signs. Apologies for absence and substitutions.
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies for absence from Councillor Clack.
And Chair, Councillor Clayton is chairing a committee at the Town Council, but will be here as soon as he can. So he's not absent, but he's also not present yet.
That's fine, thank you. But there are no substitutions. So we have the minutes of two meetings to approve tonight, pages 1 to 12. The committee meeting held on the 31st of March and also the 5th of May 2026 as a correct record. Are there any questions or comments on the minutes? Sandra, Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. On the call-in minutes, I'm not saying they are not accurate, but I am concerned that they are not. How shall I put it? If I were an outsider reading this, I would not understand why the call-in had happened or what the discussions were, as there are 42 lines of minutes which are quoting statements made by the leader and the officers, but the fundamental reason for the call-in is just reduced to the first paragraph, whereas I think it deserved a little bit more expansion there, because anyone reading that does not know why there was a call-in. Also, I believe, and you please correct me on this, but I believe that one of the members asked if there could be a recorded vote, and that was judged as not necessary and refused. But maybe I'm misremembering. I just thought that ought to be in the minutes. But if it helps, I just think there was an opening speech. I know it was my own, but it was it came out in some detail as to the detail of the lack of evidence that was felt there was before Cabinet, before this decision was taken. And there is a lot of information as to what the leader said afterwards, but there is insufficient to me information there. I don't know what the answer is, but I would like to share that with the committee, that I am concerned it isn't quite clear. Thank you, Chair. Brought my speech with me in case that helps, to insert a bit of the words there, which gave very specific reasons as to the reasons for the call-in, which are not reproduced in the minutes.
Jim's going to reply to you.
Sorry, thank you, through you, Chair. Obviously, as we know, the minutes aren't a verbatim record of the meeting, but the other thing that I'd just point out, obviously, these minutes are meant to be read alongside the other published papers for this committee, of which the reasons for the call-in were published as part of that. So looking at these in isolation, I do take your point. However, you know, these are in the style that we normally adopt, but there were additional papers over and above the minutes that were published with this. So like I say, I would hope as a member of the public, you would read the papers as well as the minutes, and indeed look at the YouTube stream, which is still available online, to get the full picture of what went on that evening.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jim. I appreciate that clarification.
And I was going to say the same as Jim. I know that sounds a little bit glib, but I don't remember it being a recorded vote. But I don't have my notes of the previous meeting with me, so.
Sorry, I wasn't clear. I think one of us asked whether there could be a recorded vote, and it was decided there wouldn't be, but that is not in the minutes. But yeah, I just felt okay.
That's fine.
Sorry, I'm being a nitpicker. You know me. Thank you, Chair. It's fine. We can move on.
Thank you for your attention to detail. So if there are no other questions, I will.
Chairman, on a slightly lighter note, the minutes for the meeting of 5th May, I'm very pleased to see my name is mentioned twice in the opening thing, but I'm not sure I was there twice. There's only one of me. Was only a light comment.
Thank you. So on that basis, I will sign the minutes and we'll move on to declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest not already registered? No. Oh, yes, Councillor Morgan.
Press the wrong button.
That's fine.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other declarations of interest? Oh, right. So Kathy has declared, or sorry, Councillor Morgan has declared that she is a tenant of West Kent Housing, but has come to the meeting with an open mind, if I've summarised you correctly. Thank you. Any other declarations of interest? No. All right, but that's fine. Thank you. Next items, responses of the Cabinet to reports of the Scrutiny Committee, if any, which I don't believe there are any.
There are none, Chair.
And then item 4, actions of the previous meeting, if any, and these are on pages 13 and 14. Whether you want to note these, or are there any questions about these? If all good, we'll move on to the next item, which is the external invitee, which we welcome Ian Johnson again, or Johnson, sorry, it's my writing. Who, if you'd like to introduce yourself, please, and Stephanie will show the slides. And I think if I'm happy to wait for questions to be left to the end, allow you to continue your flow, and then we'll see how it goes. Thank you very much.
Yeah, hi, good evening, everyone, and thanks for inviting me. I'm Ian Johnson. I'm West Kent's new chief executive, so I joined. It is red, I think. Do you want me to? Sorry. Do you want me to?
Normally the light is on, but when you moved it, the light comes on, but we can hear you.
Okay.
That
good.
just confused me.
I'll keep talking until you tell me not to. Yeah, so hi, I'm Ian Johnson, West Kent's chief executive. I joined in February, so I'm about 4 months in, so still relatively new. I think in previous years, Tracy Allison, my predecessor, had been in and met you all. I've got a short presentation really just to give you a little bit about some background on West Kent, which I appreciate a lot of you will know, so I'll be quite quick with that. A little bit about some of my priorities since arriving, a little bit about the work we do in the area, particularly focused on the Seven Oaks District Council, but obviously we operate more broadly than that, and a little bit about the partnership we have with the council and the kind of the benefits of that really. So I'll kind of try and go through that, quite quickly, but as you say, Chair, happy to take questions at the end. So the first slide, this is just a reminder of West Kent Housing Association's what we're here to do really. So our vision, as you may know, is to provide great places for people to live and space for people to grow. Our purpose is about creating a prosperous, strong and sustainable society and a place where people can plan for the future. And my personal view is you can't plan for the future unless you have a secure place to live. And that's where we try to come in. Our objectives are around delivering excellent services, about providing homes and building communities, about growing and reshaping our organisation, and about being, well, officially we want to be one of the best social housing providers in Kent. I'd like us to be the best housing provider in Kent. And then on the next slide, please. It's just some facts and figures on our organisation. So we have we only operate in Kent. We have 8,900 homes across Kent. The vast majority of those, so 6,000, are in the Seven Oaks area. We are regulated by the regulator of social housing, and we were essentially given 2 gradings at the moment, a G grading, which is for governance, and we have G1, which is the highest that they do. And then we have a grading for V, which stands for financial viability. V2 is the second highest, is still a compliant grading, and I would argue that organisations who have a V1 maybe aren't trying quite as hard as they could to be building as many houses as they can. We will in due course get a C grading, which is for what they call the consumer regulation. We haven't yet been inspected under that regime, but when we are, we'll be aiming for C1, which is the highest grade. We employ 340 people, again, the vast majority of which are based in either our main office in Sevenoaks across the road, or our second office in Swanley. We provide or invest £1.5 million a year every year in what we call community investment, and I'll come on to the different things that involves later. That's that's as well as the core purpose of being a social landlord. I've worked for 2 larger housing associations, and we didn't invest anything like that in community activities. So I'm really proud and pleased to have kind of inherited all of that good work. We spend a lot of time making sure we involve our residents, and we have about 600 plus actively involved residents that input into what we do in different ways. We are regulated against what are called tenant satisfaction measures, so independent surveys that measure our performance. For all of those, we're in pretty much the top or the second quartile nationally. More importantly than that, in 11 of the 12 of those, we improved year on year, and that's the main thing we want to drive, is that kind of continuous improvement year on year. We definitely get stuff wrong, but overall, on balance, our customers are pretty happy with most things we do. So our customer satisfaction is 4.5 out of 5. Our satisfaction with our repairs service, which can be one of the most difficult, one of the most emotive kind of areas, is 4.6 out of 5. Clearly, the quality of the homes we provide is really important. All of our homes are compliant with decent home standards, and over 92% are already at what's called EPCC, which is a measure of energy efficiency, which we know has a big bearing on how affordable it is for people to live in our homes and to heat them. So there's some kind of statistics on what we do and our performance. If you could move on, Stephanie, thank you. This is just a slide really building on the fact that I'm quite new. Consider myself really fortunate to have inherited a strong relationship with the council as our main stakeholder. I've absolutely no intention of letting that slip or deteriorate. So this slide really is about kind of giving you some reassurance around that. So the top row of the slide are very much things that I have no intention of changing. So we remain absolutely committed to partnership with the council. Our strategy and our values are the same. Our focus on customers and being a customer-first organisation remains. Our geographical focus, both in terms of Kent and in terms of West Kent and Sevenoaks being our core area, that isn't intended to change. And I intend to ensure the organisation stays as committed as ever to developing new social housing, because we know it's desperately needed in this part of the world. And the things on the second row, the 4 things at the bottom there, are not new things for West Kent, but they're things I particularly want to emphasise during my tenure. So I think consistency of service delivery. Like I say, we get a lot of things right, but sometimes we don't. And I think there's more we can do to make sure we improve our consistency. I think there's a bit more we can do to make sure we're really listening to what our customers and our colleagues, actually, our frontline colleagues, are telling us. There's a piece around using technology to mean that for those customers who want to interact with us digitally, we've positioned that in a better way for them to do so. And there's a piece around making sure we respond to the changing but really increasing needs of our customers. So I'll come on to that later, but the needs of our customers and the demands we face are increasing consistently year in, year out, and we need to respond to that. Right. The next slide is just a little bit about, I suppose, our world and some of the challenges that we face in housing association land, not in a woe is me sense, because I absolutely know the council has many of its own pressures as well, but I just think it's helpful to give you some of the context in the spirit of that partnership, really. So I've listed 4 things. First, really, is about the demands and that we serve from our customers are increasing significantly year in, year out. That, there's a whole range of reasons for that, from quite legitimately customers having higher expectations, which is quite right, but also through to the vulnerability, the additional needs that increasingly people who are in social housing have, partly because of the shortage of housing across the country. That is manifesting in increased demand for pretty much all our services, really, year in, year out. The second box is around new and increased regulations, and there's a list there, but the list could equally go on for the rest of the page. So I won't read that out. What I would say is that every single one of those regulations is absolutely right and is therefore a good reason to raise the standards that our sector works to. The point really is that each of them therefore also comes with additional costs, sometimes quite significant, and with additional workload and kind of pressure on the organisation. Putting both of those things together, the committee will probably know that the way our rents are regulated is such that regardless of the increases in our costs through those things, our rents remain the same, which is as it should be, because we're there to provide affordable housing. But those 2 things obviously create increasing financial pressure. You can see that in the metrics for the housing association sector overall. So as a sector across England, we used to spend about £5 to £6 billion a year on repairs and maintenance. That's well over 10 billion today and continues to kind of go up rapidly. Similarly, what we call the interest cover performance of our sector, which really is a measure of whether our core business as a landlord is washing its face and able to service the debt we have. That shows kind of quite rapid deterioration across a number of years across the whole country. So we're under, like many other parts of the public and social sector, we are under increasing financial pressure. And then the 4th box is around where we think government and our regulator is taking us, which is quite rightly, again, a demand for us to have both more social homes and better social homes, which is entirely for the good, but it comes back to some of those financial trade-offs that we have. All of which is partly a preamble to say, in that environment, the partnership we have with you and the ability to work in that partnership, to be creative, to find solutions is really, really important to us. Which takes me on to the next slide. So as I say, I'm really fortunate that I think I've inherited a good relationship with the council. My team work really well with Sarah and her team. I think there's a real kind of pragmatism and kind of can-do attitude there. We have a partnership agreement with the council that's coming towards an end, so we're working on the next iteration of that. We have excellent day-to-day relationships that mean we can kind of unblock issues and help sort things out. And we're totally committed to keeping those relationships intact through the reorganisation that we know that you'll be going through. I won't read them out, but the objectives in that partnership agreement we have with the council are around the things you would expect. So affordable housing provision, homelessness, sustaining tenancies, right sizing and making best use of the limited housing stock that is there, place-based approach, regeneration, focus on communities and community outcomes. So all the things that I think you'd probably expect to see. And we work together with the council to try and achieve those. Next slide, please. So the next few slides, and then I will open up for questions, are just some examples and some of the things we're doing within the Sevenoaks area specifically. So we have 4 live new social housing schemes in the council's area. Mills Crescent, which is a 13 rural homes in Seal Village. Heath Close, which is a mixture of social rent and shared ownership homes in White Oak. 23 homes at Farmstead Drive in Edenbridge. And we have a live planning application for a regeneration scheme at Greatness Lane in Sevenoaks, where we want to replace 8 relatively dated and low quality homes with 26 higher quality homes, also regenerating in so doing. There's some kind of garage sites and other other space there. So we have the funding in place, and we're keen to do that, subject to a planning approval. So what you'll get from those 4 is a mix of low-cost rented homes, but also shared ownership, and that is our approach across our development programme across Kent. Next slide, please, Stephanie. Thank you. This one is just a quick illustration of the money we invest in our existing homes, so not the new homes, the homes we already have in Sevenoaks. We spend about 3.4 million a year in this area. We spend more than that, obviously, across Kent, and each year that manifests into nearly 200 new kitchens for our customers, 88 new bathrooms in this particular year, and so on and so on. Keeping all of those homes up to date is obviously a hugely important thing. No matter how good our services are, the quality of our homes is essentially our underlying product. So we have to make sure that they remain safe and decent places for people to live. Thank you. And then this slide is about, I mentioned the community investment activities that we have, the 1.5 million a year, which as I say is unusual and really positive. It's mostly concentrated in Sevenoaks and Swanley anyway, that being where most of our homes are. But on this slide, I've given the figures specifically for Sevenoaks council area. So you can see we have 2,500 residents involved in different community events as part of that community building. We have over 800 residents who we've provided individual support to, which could range from money advice to tenancy sustainment to helping with employment prospects, hardship funding. We've helped customers access nearly 500,000 of benefits this year that they wouldn't otherwise have done through the advice we've been able to provide. And we leverage as far as possible our supply chain to bring in additional kind of social value contributions into the area. We have 181 residents in the last year that we've given employment support to, and as you can see from the numbers, a number of those have gone on to gain employment successfully. And then the last thing I mentioned is, there's the range of other things as well, but in particular, the House Youth Project, which won an award with the council actually very recently, based in Edenbridge. I've been there myself a couple of times. It does a fantastic thing for young people who've got some quite difficult circumstances in Edenbridge. And yeah, it's a great service. There's a whole lot of other things we do under that community umbrella that I could talk to you about, but I won't in the interest of time. And then I think the final slide, really just a recap. So we believe we have and very much want to remain in a very strong partnership with you. We'd love to do more. We know you'd love us to do more, and we want to find ways to do that within the constraints that we all operate within. And finally, as I say, we definitely don't get everything right. I'm sure Councillor Morgan will know that. But we get a lot of things right, and we are most importantly an organisation committed to listening and learning and trying to improve. So yeah, so that was all I've got to say as an intro. Happy to take whatever questions you have.
And myself of a specific name of something which I know is on my phone, and I was hoping it was going to come back to me, but thank you. I'll open it up to the floor. But Councillor Skinner.
Yeah, thank you very much. I've got 3 or 4 questions, if I may. And first of all, thank you very much for the presentation. Very comprehensive, and I assume it'll be circulated afterwards, if that's possible. I'm sure it is.
I will. Yes.
I'm sure it will be. Sorry, I was just sort of that wasn't one of the questions, by the way. So first of all, what's your current experience with accessing development grants from government to allow you to invest in areas which were non-viable during previous government?
Yeah,
been good or bad?
Like I say, I've been here 4 months, so relatively limited sample, but actually really positive. So we've put in 3 bids in the latest round. 2 of those have already been approved, and the third one we think is in a really good shape. So and to be fair, actually relatively quickly as well. So I think we try to make sure we put in a lot of groundwork with Homes England in the run up to actually submitting the formal documentation, and that seems to help.
And what would be the consequences of you getting those grants?
Exactly as you say, building social housing that we would otherwise not be able to do.
So I'm just wondering, can you give us the specific places you're going to be doing that? Or
I'd come back to you on the three.
Brilliant,
On the,
thank you.
the three we've submitted.
That would be helpful to see
Yeah.
that. Shall I go through all my questions, Chair? Yeah. Your experience in getting timely adaptations for residents to improve access, so promoting care at home and timely return from hospital.
Yeah, we think we're doing pretty well most of the time. We have obviously one of the hardest bits is the actual physical works to the properties and making sure we have the supply chain in place to do that. Again, I'm kind of fortunate that I've inherited a really good contractor relationship with a company called Brentwoods, who are very local. We are by far their main customer, which means that has lots of positives in terms of the influence and kind of the responsiveness that we get. They don't get everything right either, but I think we're doing in the round a pretty good job. It is a increasingly demanding area, as I say. The proportion of our customers who have need for that service is increasing. No way around that.
And can you give us any idea of the scale or the numbers of adaptations or some kind of?
If it's okay, I'll come back to you on that.
Brilliant, thank you. May I continue? As you will be aware, there's a new waste collection regime that's being introduced in Sevenoaks.
Yes.
Are you satisfied that that's going to work well for your residents? And what issues have you discussed with SDC to ensure a smooth transition?
Yeah, very, very topical. Sarah and I were on a meeting about it earlier today. So yes, so we are fully aware and we are fully supportive. We understand all of the reasons why it needs to happen. It is challenging and you can imagine, we are not an organisation who wants to impose solutions on our residents, and people have. It's an emotive topic. People have quite strong views about where they would want rubbish facilities to be sited. So we want to go through that in a really measured, consultative way. That takes time. So I think we have got some challenges in terms of the October deadline, but that is what we're aiming for. And I think the other thing we've discussed with Sarah and her team is around those of our customers who may not easily be able to get their rubbish from their property to the communal area, and although we only provide independent living rather than people in higher levels of need, there are still quite a lot of people who actually that may struggle with that task. So we need to work out how we support those people.
But you're confident that come October your residents will be able to manage the new waste system effectively?
That's what we're aiming for. I'm not sure I'd go so far to say I'm confident all of the properties and all the residents will have got to that point. We've got some outside help and are doing a survey of all of the buildings and blocks to work out exactly what physical works are required, and that's where one of the other than communication with residents, the other big variable is how much physical work is needed on site to create a place for the bin facilities to go. So I'll feel more confident once we have the results of that survey, because that will give us a clearer picture of the money, and the time needed.
So does this mean that there's going to be a cost to the West Kent housing to adapt?
Yes, yes, there is. We're certainly budgeting at the moment for a figure not that far shy of £1 million.
£1 million, cost £1 million.
But as I say, that comes with big caveats in terms of who have done those surveys. We don't.
But it is a significant,
absolutely.
significant amount. Just last question on this: you're getting all the support you need from the district council in order to move this forward.
We had a really positive meeting today,
and they're being appropriately strict on the one side, but adaptive on the other.
I think that's a good summary of the meeting we had today. It's an important objective. We need to do our part on it, but there are challenges.
Yes, Sarah is grinning over your shoulder. So if I may move to my last question, Chair. Thank you. How much stock are you going to have to sell? Because getting to new installation standards will make your current stock uneconomic to repair or to refurbish. And what are you doing to improve the stock of 4-bed housing?
Yeah. So on the first one, in terms of how much stock we have to sell, relatively limited. Ideally we wouldn't have to sell any, but we're talking low single digits, a year across Kent. And obviously not all of that will be in Sevenoaks. We try to do it both sensitively and selectively. So we do have homes where actually economically they need more money spent on them than actually is probably proportionate. So we'd rather spend that money on newer or higher quality homes elsewhere. So it's selectively done, but
And 4-bed houses?
4-bed housing, I'd have to come back to you on, but there's a huge need for it.
Yeah.
And we, one of the things we're looking at, not just on 4-beds, but generally, is around how we can help customers right size.
Yeah.
So where we have people under occupying homes,
Yeah.
some of which will be 3- and 4-bed homes,
Sure.
where families have moved on. How can we free up that capacity for the benefit of the system? Really?
Thank you very much. I'm done, Chair.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? I have a few, not quite on my sleeve, but on my screen and on my pad. So if anyone else has any questions, or Sandra?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. Having been on scrutiny for some years now, it's always really interesting to have West Kent coming in and seeing how the issues evolve over the years. And congratulations and welcome. And congratulations on the house project. I was at the Community Awards and it was a really exciting moment to see that being awarded a prize. So well done. My question is, it's on the financing side. I can really understand, given international events and inflation of construction materials, as well as the cost of labour and so on, why you'd have significant inflation in the cost of maintaining and then improving properties. But have you found any areas which, thanks to new technology, you can actually invest in to save money in terms of energy use? I do worry, and that may be because I've come from countries where building standards are different, I'm not saying always better, but just different, is that I do worry that houses here are not being built sufficiently to be insulated from damp, cold and heat. We used to be a fairly temperate climate, but now sometimes we get extremes. And I just wonder how that affects you and what technologies you've been able to use, what you can bring in that might be able to save on what would have been an expensive thing, but now might be cheaper. Sorry, long question, but thank you.
No, it's a really good question. In terms of saving money, do you mean for us as an organisation or for our customers, or
in terms of, yes, I mean both. It sometimes new technology allows you to do something a lot more cheaply because it's come in, and I'm thinking heat generators, solar power panels, and more. But you would know more about it than I would.
Yes. Well, I don't know, but I will endeavour to answer your question. So in terms of saving money for our residents, for customers, every new home we build is at least an EPC B rating, and in many cases an EPC A rating. We wouldn't want to build anything that's a lower standard than that, because we'll end up having to go back and retrofit it in 10 years' time, which isn't good for anyone. So our aim is that the new homes we're building are very much energy efficient and affordable for people to live in. Clearly, it's harder for our older stock, although, as I say, most of it is already at an EPC C level, which is pretty good. And we have a significant number already of heat pumps and things like that as part of the decarbonisation. The heat pumps, as you mentioned them, isn't really turning out to be any cheaper for us. They're much more expensive than a gas boiler, and the servicing requirements at the moment are much more expensive because it's a relatively immature market. I think over time, hopefully that changes. But so it's probably not saving us money, but it's definitely saving customers money. In terms of broader approaches to construction, I think there's lots of things that are talked about in our sector, and I think you're absolutely right. Other countries in some ways do this better than we do in terms of modern methods of construction. I think we've done some of that, but a relatively low level, I'd say, which is kind of reflective of social housing in Britain and housing generally in Britain, I think, really. So there's a lot. I'm sure you're right. I'm sure there's a lot we could learn. Broadening your question to how new technology generally could save us money, absolutely. So we have a number of our key projects for this year internally about finding ways that make things easier for customers to contact us, but also lower cost for us to deliver the services we do. So helping those customers who want to do things digitally, for example, we're investing money in that. We are starting to invest in AI, which obviously needs to be done really carefully and comes with risks. But actually, I was with our community safety team on Friday, and they've been doing a pilot in terms of how it's used. And there's real benefits for people who have jobs that involve digesting large amounts of information and documentation. It's been, it's really beneficial as long as the appropriate safeguards are around it. So I think there's lots of stuff to go at in terms of your underlying point about technology generally, as exactly as you pose the question, because of the pressures we face, we have to target those things.
Thank you. Councillor Lindell.
Thank you, Chair. I've got about 3 questions now. Actually, it is quite a lot for me. So when it comes to the builders who build the social housing, how much say do you have over how they build the house? Is it like 100%, or do they say, well, we can't really do that, and they just go ahead and build something?
So the short answer to your question is if they are homes we are not happy are sufficiently safe and decent for our customers to live in, then we won't take them. That's the general principle, as you'd expect. In terms of the way we build homes or arrange that, there are kind of 2 models, I suppose. One is where it's our land or land we've purchased, and we're building homes on that, and there we have a really high degree of control, and we essentially are there from the start and can design help design exactly what we want. The second route is what's called Section 106, as you'll know, where we have slightly less control, because it's usually a development built by somebody else, and we're acquiring the social housing units in that estate. But we still go through those same checks of making sure that the homes are safe and decent and all of that. We probably just have slightly less influence on some of the more discretionary elements, I suppose.
Okay, thank you, Ian. Yeah, and just going on from that, when it comes to the current heat waves that are going to increase, as we all know, is there going to be much done, hopefully, about painting certain houses that are really and flats that are really facing the sun, painting them white, especially their roofs as well, plus outside shutters, which, as we know, can make a lot of homes cooler, as they have on the continent? Is that something that's in the pipeline or has been thought about?
It's definitely something that's talked about. And actually, I was with one of our customers last week who suggested this very thing, because they were having a similar challenge. Something we're thinking about. I'd probably be wrong to say it's kind of, we have a clear plan at the moment as either West Kent as an organisation or us as a sector. But certainly, I think that the focus from being very much about cold and damp is very much shifting towards actually recognising that the weather we've had over the last couple of weeks is probably not going to be as unusual in the future as it is at the moment.
Thank you. And my last question, let me find it here now. Yeah, I looked on the website, the right sizing scheme, whereby an elderly person who's living in a 3-4-bedroom house, as some of us might know, can apply to you to then go into social housing, or how does it work exactly?
Yeah, so it's usually one of our residents been in a property that they are essentially under occupying, and it might be someone who had a bit like the question earlier, had a 3 or 4 bedroom property, but the kids have moved on, and people find themselves in a home that's maybe bigger than what they need or bigger than what they want, actually, sometimes. But the process of moving, particularly in later years of one's life, can be quite stressful and quite daunting and all of that. So we have a dedicated post that we've created and a dedicated project that is around trying to support those customers who want to do that, which better for them and helping take some of the stress out of that, but also better for the whole system of housing, in the sense that 3 or 4 bed home then becomes available for someone who needs it, and more people get housed ultimately. For lots of understandable reasons, it is a sensitive and emotional topic for people who are at that stage of their life. So we need to do it in a kind of managed way, really.
All right, I think I understand it a bit better now. So it's only for your existing clients, and for some of them, like you say, you wouldn't put any pressure on them. But how many years would they sit in something that is 3-4, beds on their own?
I mean, we don't have the ability, nor would I want us to have the ability to be able to force people to move. I'm very proud of the fact we give people homes that are theirs for as long as they want them. So it's sensitively done, but there is also a piece about taking away some of the fear that people have. Quite often people recognise that the situation might not be ideal or sustainable, but it's quite a daunting step, particularly if you've been recently bereaved or something like that.
Understood. Thank you, Ian.
I mean, having just been through the process of downsizing, it is quite traumatic. But you need to give people both incentives and reassurance. Are you able to do both?
Yeah. Yes, to a degree. So the incentivization part of that is that obviously in a smaller property, you pay lower rent, quite significantly so in some cases. So that can help. Some of it is about the incentive of trying to make sure we find a property that meets the needs of that customer. We haven't gone too far down the road of kind of financial incentives further than that at the moment, but pros and cons, I would say.
I had another question, John.
Well, your mic is still on, so.
Sorry. Thank you. I'm sorry. I apologise for my late arrival. I was chairing a meeting somewhere else, and rather difficult to escape if you're chairing the meeting. I wanted to know the popularity, sorry, of solar energy for homes is increasing in Sevenoaks, a bit behind other places. What provision is there for investing in that in the properties that you rent?
Yeah, and we definitely have some, and you'll probably ask me the number, and I'll say I'll
I'm
come back
not
to you.
interested
It's as part of that, we have what's called a retrofit program, which is about improving the energy efficiency of our homes. So as I say, we've already got a lot of them up to EPCC standard, and there's some more of that to do. PV, the way that approach works is looking at the particular property, how it's constructed, and what would make the biggest bang for the buck in terms of improving the energy efficiency of the home, for the money we have to spend. Quite often PV is part of that solution. So we do that, and we have that in a number of cases. Can be quite popular with customers. In other cases, it's more about the actual fabric of the property and in the insulation and other things. So it's case by case depending on the particular property and how it's designed and built.
I mean, getting the incentives right is quite hard. Because you can make quite a big dent in people's energy bills.
Yeah.
And how does any of that come back to you as the investor?
No. And this is no. So I mean, and people in our sector have talked about this for a number of years, is whether there's a model that could be based on the rental for the property in some way, providing a payback for that. But no, in essence, we would be improving the home, and our customers would save in terms of their energy bills, which is great. But there isn't a financial payback as such for us, which is and again, I'm not in any way arguing this is wrong. We are there here to provide affordable housing, and therefore the regulation is appropriate. But it does mean there's a number of things we can spend money on to improve a property, but there isn't a financial payback. There might be a social payback, but there isn't a financial payback.
In the CICs that do this, the payback is that it enables you to do the next one. So it enables you to benefit somebody else. So anyway.
Just another question on that. Do any of your tenants ask to provide their own solar solutions?
I'm not aware we've had that, or indeed in previous organisations. I've not. Certainly our tenants do approach us about wanting to invest in their home in other ways. It might be some conservatory, or some kind of minor alteration or extension, and where it's appropriate, we'd support that. I'm not aware of. I'll ask the question. I'm not aware of PV being one of those.
I mean, it has a long payback anyway, so someone would have to. Well, I say they obviously have potentially the 10-year anyway, but it's normally over a 10-year payback, so it requires a lot of upfront. But it's a challenge. Yeah. I have a few questions that I'm going to ask myself. I had to change my glasses because I wasn't sure whether it was my glasses on the print on your screen, and my glasses made them worse. But what I didn't see, and where I'm coming to, is how many lets did you make, or new lets did you make, let's say in the last 12 months? Because if you work in the financial year, it doesn't provide, so over the last 12 months, how many lets did you make?
I'll come back to the number anyway, but to be clear, the new properties or just new lets to existing properties?
Well, we have a housing demand in the district.
Yeah.
How much of that did you fulfill where I'm coming to is, how much did you fulfill? How much was there that you didn't fulfill?
Yeah.
And how do we close the gap?
Yeah, okay. I won't guess at the numbers now, but I'm happy to come back to you.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, only because I looked at the stats today. We currently have around 1,200 people, households on the housing register. And in the last financial year, I think there were 230 lets.
Are you going to say how you're going to close the gap?
I mean, yeah, and the answer, part of the answer has to be building more social housing. But stating the obvious, that's a big gap to close, isn't it? And and so it's about doing what we can.
It is a big gap, but the thing is, if we don't address it, we're never going to close it. And it's lovely to see 4 schemes on there. And I'm aware that there are other schemes coming through as well. We've already mentioned, potentially government funding as well. But obviously there is a much bigger demand than that. I don't have the answer.
No, and there probably won't be a single answer. I guess we are. I think things like the right sizing approach that councillors have asked about. That's about making better use of the homes we already have. There's exploring whatever government funding we can do in all the different shapes it comes in, which is I think we already do and work with Sarah on that. I think there may be in the future kind of potential new models of funding the development of new homes involving kind of private sector funding, but they're very much in their infancy in terms of our sector. But I think what you're articulating is a challenge across the country, which is for all of us to find ways to square that circle, because the gap is large, as you say.
And I don't think it's an easy answer, but it's obviously something that we need to focus on, because there is a population growth that is here, and it's for some of that the younger generations getting on the housing or being housed, not even getting on the housing ladder, being housed outside of the family home is a challenge. And it's something that obviously we need to address. Do you want to answer?
If I may, I suppose this might not be what members want here tonight, but I suppose we've got a local plan going through, and that will bring forward a number of sites, and particularly for the Section 106 sites that Ian mentioned. Obviously, as a housing team, we would make recommendations for registered providers to be put forward to those developers. And with the strategic partnership agreement that we've got, we would always put forward West Kent Housing as sort of one of our key providers to deliver acquire the affordable housing on site. So I think from our point of view, to get the numbers and the growth, the local plan's quite critical for us. Thank you.
No, I can understand that. Thank you. I have another question, which is not necessarily as easy to answer.
They were the easy ones.
We'll see. You wait till you hear the question. One of the challenges that we have is that sometimes when we go to some of the social housing areas, they're noticeable because they seem run down. There doesn't appear to be some of the maintenance. Some of the common ground outside doesn't appear to be maintained. So the fencing looks shabby. I know a couple of properties where windows, I don't know how long, but it's at least 2 or 3 years where the windows have been replaced with boarding, but due to various reasons, the windows haven't been replaced. Now, obviously, there's a balance between accessing people's homes who have got mental health issues, but there's also the balance of providing I'm sure that we all want to live, and we all want to see people live in areas which are beneficial to their well-being and are nice to see. However, one of the things that came to mind when in a conversation with one of your colleagues was that rather than repairing garages and making good garages and using that as an excuse to redevelop those garage sites, if you don't do that, but you focus on building houses, that's a catch-22 situation, because you're never going to let garages which are in disrepair, and therefore, but then where there's no alternative areas of parking. So how do we work with you as local members to try and improve the surroundings for the social housing that you manage?
Yeah, there's a number of really good points in that, so I'll try and take them one by one. I think on the point about the windows being boarded up, that shouldn't be the case. If that is a West Kent property rather than a right to buy property on the estate, then please give me the details. I'll make sure it gets sorted. That shouldn't be the case.
I'm aware of two, one in Seal, one in Kemsing, but I don't go around counting them.
Yeah, no, but I'll happy to look into that. That shouldn't be the case. In terms of your point about kind of communal spaces and communal areas, I think that is one of the areas we're finding challenging. So I mentioned earlier those 12 tenant satisfaction measures we have. The one that's lagging the others is actually around those communal areas and our customer satisfaction with those. I've spent quite a bit of time in Swanley as well as other places since joining, and yeah, you could get that sense. And I think some of it was about things like fly tipping, which we know are kind of a problem nationally, but really frustrating for residents. Some of it, I think, is about small little parcels of space that it's not really clear who owns them and who's looking after them, and then do they just become a kind of dumping ground for people. So I think there's some things we could work together on around that. To your point around garage sites, we also have a project. We have a project around that as well, and a post holder who's running that for us, which is very much about trying to filter those garage sites and understand which are the ones where actually there is a active demand and need for parking if we invested in potentially in refurbishing them, versus which are the areas where actually even if we spent money on them, there isn't a particular demand there. They're not always in locations people want to use, and actually it could be a great site for a small social housing development. So we absolutely have a project around that. We've done some of that already, including near where I live actually, and yeah, that's very much live, and we work with Sarah's team around any opportunities that come out of that.
Specifically where I was coming from on that, the Park Lane garages in Kemsing, being a local member, and I'm pleased to see that the engagement that your colleagues were doing and looking to communicate with the residents. Some of the challenges there are that that is the situation.
Yeah.
But in the meetings and the discussions I have with your colleagues, we're very receptive to comments. The downside is though that in taking out 34 garages and replacing them with 5 homes, there is no ability to provide additional off-street parking. It may be able to be managed better, but it is a challenge. Moving into Seal, a member from Seal next to me, I declare that I'm chairman of Seal Parish Council, but I haven't been directly involved in the conversations about what the wording that I was looking for was the home zone in not Mills Crescent, but in Bentley's Meadow. And this was a lovely idea of trying to provide a nice scenic area. Slightly challenged though that it's left now to a state of disrepair with the conversations between Kent County Council Highways, because technically it's highways land, but it's communal land which is managed by West Kent Housing. But it's it did make me smile when they said that the mowers and the hedge cutters have been in. Well, there's no lawns, there's no hedges, but I'm sure they were looking at something else, and it was meant well. But the home zoning Seal, for example, that is long overdue for a big rethink. But the problem is, money that he's spending on it would be for renovating a communal facility rather than providing homes.
Yeah. So
how do you strike the balance then of continuing to make a location a pleasant place to park, or not just park, sorry.
Yeah.
I don't want to just say that you should take it all out the plant beds and put parking in place, but using it as a communal area, and then balancing that with the requirement where it's, for example, it's a home zone, it's there for families, and then applying the restriction that no children can, or no ball games can be played in the area, which kind of contradicts that. Would you like to comment on that, please?
Yeah, I'm afraid I don't know that particular location, but I will go away and look into it.
Welcome to have a visit with you.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'd really appreciate that. I think as a general point, you're absolutely right that we're trying to square a circle that is huge demands for investment in the actual existing homes, a huge desire to build more social homes, and then this kind of this kind of other spend that's more discretionary in nature, but can really affect how people feel about their community, and you know, and kind of avoid people feeling like it's kind of a, you know, neglected kind of space. So we try to do some of that when we can, but the spirit of your question is right. We have to strike a balance, and there's, you know, a limit to what we can spend money on. But then there are, you know, there's other way that, you know, there might be other ways to skin that cat in terms of, you know, community initiatives that you know, do things with particular green spaces and get people involved in community projects around things like that. But without knowing the particular area, it's hard for me to.
It's nice that some of the residents are aware of this, and this is how I know. I'm not a resident of that area, but the residents have raised this, and it's been discussed with Kent County Council. And I've seen, you know, it's not, basically an impasse was reached. Well, you know, it's there. So now I'm looking to come back in, and I'll deal with that separately.
Yeah.
One of the questions I have, and again, it's similar sort of things. How do you? We often get as members contact from people about antisocial behaviour or neighbourly disputes, which, you know, we look to involve Sarah and her team. Do you have any comment on how well you're doing with that? Because this again is, you can see I've got a theme here of nice areas and people where people want to live, and being inclusive.
Yeah, and so to your first question about antisocial behaviour and how well do I think we're doing? I think we're doing okay, but I think we can do better. I think in some of it, you know, is a challenging area. So, you know, we have challenges in terms of, you know, the kind of volatile nature of the issues and the individuals sometimes involved. We have challenges in terms of the legal system and the process that goes through at the moment. We have challenges around, we may actually quite often be doing quite a lot behind the scenes, but because of the confidential nature of the issues, you can't always share that with all of the people, which I totally get. If you're then one of the local residents suffering from the ASB, feels like nothing's happening because you can't touch and feel it. So it can be frustratingly slow for the people on the receiving end of it. I think we do pretty well. We've won awards and, you know, get kind of good feedback on some things, but I think it's an area we can definitely do better. I was with our team that do this activity. We have a specialist team who only do this, based in Swanley, but covering all of Kent. And actually, one of the things they were saying to me is that the problems tend to be concentrated in newer developments, actually, because the levels of need that people have to get into new social housing schemes now actually are much more acute than they probably were 10, 20, 30 years ago. So they see a big concentration around new developments. One of the things we're doing to respond to that is making sure that our communities team that I mentioned focus heavily on those new, where we're building a new estate. They spend a lot of time there trying to do kind of community work to kind of help people get to know their neighbours, help people get to know their area, and just try and help put down the sort of the tentative kind of roots of a community that needs to grow. It's a really difficult area, and I'm sure there are things we could do better. Probably the main one being around, from the cases I've looked into so far, around communication. I think actually, in most cases, it feels like we are doing the things we can do within the constraints of the system, but we could let people know what's happening more, because I think otherwise they're left seeing the problem but not knowing what's happening.
Well, to finish off by saying thank you for everything that's been done in Mills Crescent, because I know that last year some of the timetables of and possibly the migrating of newts wasn't carried out in the zone as it should have been. But it's really nice to see that project is coming on board, because I think that when you look back at some of these projects, that when the housing survey and seal was done, that I did notice the date was 2017, so my eyesight can't be that bad. But so we're now 9 years. We will be 10 years when it comes through to building just 13 homes. Yeah. That is it's not your fault, but it just illustrates how long it takes to grow the stock, and that's why we've got such a backlog, and there is no simple answer.
No,
but thank you. Does anyone else from the floor have any questions? Councillor Cole.
Yeah, thank you. You, one of the councillors mentioned about elderly people, and I know Kent County Council used to have a policy of extra care housing, and it seems to have fallen out of favour somewhat. But I always felt it seemed quite a sensible policy where people can move into a home for the rest of their lives, whatever medical condition they have. And I know it's probably it's not as cheap a housing solution, but nevertheless, I think it's still there is a place for it. And I was just wondering what West Kent's view on that was.
100% agree. We have a number of buildings or schemes across Kent that are specifically for older people. And I think the technical definition of that is over 55, which doesn't seem that old to me. But yeah, we're part of a initiative called KEFA, which is basically was a private finance initiative that was about creating new older persons accommodation across Kent. So we have a number of properties that we look after as part of that. So it is absolutely part of our footprint. Some of those schemes are reasonably new as well. So there has been recent investment in it. In our development pipeline at the moment, we don't have any new extra care schemes. But you're absolutely right. There is a need for it, and in my experience elsewhere, they can be financially even more challenging to make viable for lots of I suppose understandable reasons. But there's a huge demand there, and the majority of the older people we house will probably be in what we would call general needs housing rather than specialist housing, and that's true countrywide, unfortunately.
Otherwise, I know it's been an hour, and thank you. It's probably hopefully it hasn't been too arduous for you. But I think engagement like this is really useful because we can, scrutiny is holding people to account, but at the same time, there is a genuine desire to improve things, for that, not just for our district, but for our communities and wherever they are. And thank you, Sarah, for attending as well and supporting. You're welcome to stay. You're welcome to leave.
I'll probably take my leave if that's okay.
That's fine. So we'll see then how long the rest of the agenda will take. But thank you again. Take care. Thank you very much.
Thank you. No, thank you.
So the next item on the agenda is performance monitoring. So I think if these are on pages 15 to 30, these reports are, as we don't have the portfolio holders, we don't have the specific portfolio holder reports. And what we do have is a general report to note. And rather than referring to each page, I'm just going to refer to the pages on 15 and 16 and 17 and ask if there are any questions about that. And then go on, Councillor Skinner.
Yeah, no, thank you. I was just wondering if you could let us know why we don't have a portfolio holder here tonight.
Yes, absolutely. We have, due to the rotation of portfolio holders and the requests being made, 2 portfolio holders that we were lining up were unable to attend, and they deferred. And because of the notice that was given, we were unable to identify anyone else because of who's previously spoken as well in that cycle. Hopefully that leads to a shorter meeting, but not necessarily less scrutiny tonight.
Yes, just to say, obviously disappointing that portfolio holders are not here tonight.
I understand, and it is noted. Thank you. Wasn't sure that was wasn't quite sure that was a question, Councillor Clayton, or your arm. Either one, it doesn't matter.
Right. Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm new to all this, so I'm a bit confused. But I mean, looking at the range of information provided to us here, there are some areas which are in reasonable shape, and some which are not, and seem to be persistently problematic, mainly due to staff shortage. And if the staff shortage issue is a systematic issue, it would be helpful to know, whether the other authorities I'll leave this as a question to hang for the next meeting, maybe. whether the authorities with which we are likely to combine in the next life of local government reorganisation have the same problems and the same performance issues, and whether they've managed to get the way out of it. It's just, I mean, because we're going to end up managing this as part of a larger body in 2 years' time. It's not very far away. Thank you.
Yes, so I think that if there are specific questions about the exceptions report tonight, the challenge that we have is that the pages 19 to, what is it, 19 to 30, they are all for April. So it is 1 month at the beginning of the year. So it is not a, unless it's compared to the previous 12 months, it isn't a representative figure. I do know personally from the discussions that we've had with regards to LGR effect, if it does happen, we have a obligation to maintain services until the end of March 28. And there will be, a shadow authority next year. However, as we are seeing that there will always be changes of staff, and as uncertainty becomes greater, the ability to recruit and maintain staff is more challenging, and that is being addressed. I don't know whether, as Jim's just blowing his nose, whether Jim wants to add to that or whether Lee wants to add to that, please.
I think I can make various comments on it. I mean, if you look at the probably the very first indicator that's on page 19 of this report relates to building control, and Councillor Clayton makes a point around staff shortages and whether that's similar to some of the other authorities potentially. I would suggest the answer to that one is yes, very much so. I think it's something that we're very familiar with, whether it's to do with the number of qualified building control surveyors in the area or indeed in the country, whether it's to do with the increased pressures on qualified building control surveyors as a result of the new Building Safety Act, those kind of things. That is very much not a Sevenoaks specific issue. It's a West Kent and indeed a national issue, and we see that replicated across a number of areas across the council, where some of those professional areas you're fishing in a very shallow pool to try and get the resources in. So as Councillor Haslam says, though, the focus for us is very much on maintaining the services at the level that we always have done for the next 2 years, certainly, and that is undoubtedly going to be challenging.
And certainly I can add to some of the, the aspects on the planning, for example, even though our metrics may be low, Sevenoaks District Council is a very well run planning authority in compared to many across England. Which is a really good thing to have acknowledged, but it doesn't mean to say that we can't get better, and that's why the metrics are there to hold us to account. So Councillor Skinner.
Yes, sorry, can I pick up a couple of points on that? First of all, I think it's our job as a scrutiny committee to scrutinise the performance of the council, not to provide explanations from the council. So, I mean, I appreciate the comments you were making, Chair, but I think it's our job to scrutinise rather than to defend. And second point, I think Councillor Clayton's point about comparison with the other boroughs and districts with whom we may be joining is valid. And it would be helpful, I think, to understand where staff shortages are because of a generic problem, and you absolutely understand about building control, but where, and I would expect to see problems in respect to building control across other councils. But we know, for example, that Tunbridge Wells has been taking special action to support staff through local government reorganisation. They've put in place special systems to do that. And it would be interesting to know if the work that they have done has resulted in better staff retention than in Sevenoaks or indeed Maidstone or Tunbridge. I'm not proposing that we get an answer now, but I think that's the kind of question that we ought to be scrutinising in respect of the kind of issue we ought to be scrutinising as we go into local government reorganisation. So, I mean, if officers have got those figures, obviously very happy to hear them. But if they haven't, perhaps we could have a look at those at a future meeting.
Lee, do you want to add to that, please?
Chairman, if I'm happy to do my best to try and answer that question. As I mentioned before the start of the meeting, Councillor Skinner, you were going to ask me something inevitably this evening that I couldn't answer. We are not privy to staff retention rates in different councils. And of course, they're all looking at their own arrangements for how they retain and motivate their staff over the coming year. The council here has approved a number of measures to try and make sure we retain as many people as possible, but at the same time, our colleagues, our staff need to be very much mindful of their own futures, and their external pressures and the things that affect their lives will ultimately make them decide where they need to go next. For us, certainly, we are talking regularly with our West Kent colleagues at more senior levels. It's not staff to staff conversations at this stage or manager to manager conversations at this stage across the board. But we are continuing to have those conversations where if we are seeing areas such as building control where a council is beginning to find performance or staffing resources limited, looking to each other to see how we can support each other through that. Building control happens to be a really good example where the managers have come together already and they have produced a paper that sets out some potential future options, but those will be geography dependent, as you would expect, and something that will be revisited once we're through this month.
Before, yeah, actually, you're gone. Yes, gone.
Thank you very much. I'm just extremely aware that time is passing, and as the chair pointed out, this council has got to be able to continue to provide services right up to the end of its extended term. So that's into 2028. The closer we get to that date, the harder it is going to be to recruit staff. Therefore, the harder it's going to be to deliver the services. All of us would be despondent, to say the least, if the last memory of Sevenoaks District Council was a failure to deliver core services. And I'm sure that this is something that is very much in the minds of staff, of officers. It's very much in the minds of councillors as well. And I think as a scrutiny committee, we need to be very alive to this issue. And as a scrutiny committee, I think we would want to be assured that the council, the cabinet, is taking the steps that are needed to ensure that services are continued at a very high quality all the way up till the 1st of May 2028 or whatever the precise date is. This may be something we can come back to when we're looking at the working group, but that's later in the session. It sounds as though we don't have the data in front of us or the information in front of us to assess this. I'm slightly nervous, that said, that the next meeting of the council's, the scrutiny committee is, help me, it's October.
It's the 22nd of October, not the 2nd of October.
Yeah, so, which is a long time off. We've only 4 or 5 months off. And that's a hefty chunk of the percentage of the remaining life of this council. So I think getting some assurance early is going to be important.
At the same time, I would counter that. It would be nice to have the same assurance from the government about when they're going to make an announcement and when they're going to make a statutory change order.
Yeah,
because
I accept that, Chair, but I mean, we all live in times of uncertainty and we have to plan for uncertainty. I mean, I obviously don't know about the officers in the room, but I suspect that very few of the councillors in this room voted for the current government. But I think that, but we must be clear that there is a significant potential on this. We will know in the next couple of weeks, one way or the other, I suspect. and that uncertainty has been difficult. But we're mature, and we like to think we're a competent council, so we should be able to deal with uncertainty.
And the fact is, we don't know, so therefore there is uncertainty.
Well, of course, there's uncertainty, but we know that there is a high probability that there will be a significant change, and that uncertainty may be an intellectual puzzle to us, but it is a very real uncertainty for officers who are having to, as was stated, are having to make really important and difficult decisions about the future for themselves and their family. And I don't think we ought to undermine that. I know you're not doing that, Chair, but these are really important questions, which I think we need to take very seriously.
No, I think that's noted and it's accepted. One thing I was going to say when I didn't interrupt you, but I was going to say before, is something you said. I wasn't looking to defend, I was complimenting, which is slightly different, but I can understand how it was taken.
Can I ask if that was complimenting with an E or an I?
I'd have to get my phone out to tell you. So going back to the reports, if I may, is that the exception reports are the 10 items on pages 19 to 20, and then we have the additional for information reports, which have been provided on the basis of the guidance of the external auditor, I believe, so that everything is in there, but in a summarised form without the detail. Are there any more questions on those? Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to look at, I mean, sadly, we don't have the right officers, but on page 20, where the two missed waste collections, because of course, the thing is with waste is it's very expensive to run, but with the food waste brought in, I'm assuming that the missed collections in April, speaking as a ward councillor, where there were new rounds to collect food, many people were missed and then they had to go back. And I assume that's why the April number has shot up on the middle one on page 20, number of missed collections per 100,000. If we look at the final bar on the bar chart, it's very high in April. And I think that's because of I assume it's because of the new food waste collection. On the other hand, having the food waste is fantastic because the black sacks don't weigh what they did. And food, which can be up to 90% water, is not going to be incinerated. It's going to be turned into fertilizer and energy. So I expect over the next months when we come back in October and we have the new waste collection, and hopefully for the majority of households, things will be easier. For some, it'll be much harder. And I accept that, certainly in my ward, for some people whose houses are right on a pavement and just step out, it's going to be very difficult for them to know where to put a wheelie bin without blocking the entire pavement. But all those points aside, I would expect that outlier of April hopefully will settle as the new system gets going, and it'll be less about staff absence and more about familiarity.
So I won't assume anything, and I think Lee is going to provide an answer.
Oh, how exciting. Thank you, Lee.
Chairman, thank you. You correctly say I'm not technically the correct officer to answer this question for you, but we've all been deeply involved as an organisation in trying to make sure this implementation is rolled out as effectively as possible. And through my connections to the communications team, we've been paying much attention to the food waste rollout and beyond with Dan, Trevor, and the team who are working incredibly hard to get this right for residents. You're absolutely right. April was a month we've been honest about, but those new collections did have some areas where the collection routes weren't quite achievable in the time that we expected them to be. Much of that was familiarity. We have the in-cab technology now, which is absolutely bringing that forward and making sure those number of missed collections is reducing. The hot weather and us trying to get out earlier in the day, as early as 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, did cause another peak in missed collections. Unfortunately, as not all of our residents heard those messages in the last couple of weeks. We hope as that becomes a more familiar message, as it's not something we do regularly during hot periods of hot weather, those will also diminish. What we are doing with the team is looking at some of the data collection. We do have a data collection just on food waste now because of the new technology we have. So whilst these are bits of information we can bring you now, it's likely we can improve and enhance these as the service beds in and be more specific about what's being missed and when.
Thank you, Lee. That's really reassuring because let's face it, after housing, one of our statutory duties is to collect waste, and it's costing us what, about 4 million a year. So it is a major part of the expenditure of this council. But I'm really glad the improvements are coming. I keep thinking there is a very odd parallel between road safety and waste collection. Bear with me. Road safety being one of my favourites, waste collection being another one. Yeah, I'm sorry, I have to bring it in every time. But it's 2/3 of getting it right is the psychology of the resident or the driver, is getting them to be part of the system to make it easy. And like with road safety and public transport, it needs to be convenient, it needs to be affordable, manageable, and it needs to be reliable. And these transitions are so hard to do. So I'm very grateful that you're working on it. And if there is anything we members can do, because we are messaging around WhatsApp groups going, they're collecting from 6 o'clock. Yeah, at my mum's last week, they collected at 5:30 in the morning. Anything we can do to support you, to support the residents to adapt, will help use our money better, because we spend a lot of money on this.
I don't mean to you're done. I was going to say, I don't mean to be a bore, but what's that got to do with the exceptional report and the specific data inside there? Otherwise, Councillor Lindorp has a question.
Because of so many missed collections.
Yeah. So, but it's 1 month, and I think that if we have, the plan is to have, the hope and intention is to have cleaner and greener here, and also, it comes onto the work plan in October, and it will be a very good time to review what will be. I don't want to say how many months worth of data because I'm not qualified to comment on how that will work, but it will be more than 1 month's data. But we'll move on to Councillor Lindorp. Thank you.
Yes, about the food waste. I was on a Zoom with Dan Smythe and I've forgotten why or what the overall subject was, but we got onto this, and apparently a lot of people reported that their food waste hadn't been collected, but it was because they'd seen the bin men come along and take the black sacks and then not take their food waste, and therefore reported it. Then later on, of course, the lorries come along, a different lorry, collect the food waste. So an awful lot of these food waste not collected actually were collected later in the day, but had already been reported, apparently, Dan said. There we go.
Thank you. Yes, I do. And I think that there was the view that for many residents that they thought it was all being collected by the same lorry, which it clearly isn't. And there is an ongoing, I think it's an ongoing piece of work because this is all new and lots of changes coming through. So on that basis, if there are no objections to the performance integrated reports, we note them and we move on to the next item. Or Councillor Skinner.
Sorry, I apologise. I thought we were talking about Appendix A. Are we also talking about Appendix? Are you now moving on to Appendix B?
I will. I'm talking about the exceptions, the performance monitoring, or pages 15 to 30.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I thought you were talking about the exceptions rather than all of the performance indicators.
No, we were initially. I did introduce the other reports because I think you may recall me saying that these were introduced. I do recall Councillor Robinson nodding that these were included, all the indicators, because of the guidance requests from the external auditor.
And that was precisely the point that I wanted to pick up, if I may, Chair. So the external auditor, I think, recommended that the Scrutiny Committee should receive all of the performance indicators in order that it can satisfy itself that the performance of the council is working well. The performance is good. So I suppose my question is to my colleagues on the committee, do we think that, having looked at the performance indicator report, that we are satisfied, so in other words, to deal with the auditor's response, do we think that the council is performing well? I think a more interesting question is, do we think that the indicators that are in front of us allow us to make that judgment? So do we think that the fact that these 50, I think it's 50 indicators, allow us to meet the recommendation of the audit committee. So the audit committee was saying scrutiny needs to see the indicators so that they can make a judgment about the performance of the council. Do we as a committee think we have enough information in front of us to make that decision? And if we do have enough information to make that decision, what is that decision that we're making? I think we need to honour
I think I understand. I was going to say, I think that was the question that I just asked you, but you've extended it slightly further, and I understand that. However, what I'm tempted to, I'm going to come back to you and ask you to consider is that this is the first month and the first meeting that we've had all of the performance indicators. Should we wait for another meeting and then review if there is a variance between them and see how it's working? Because again, these figures are only, again, all, if I look at, say, if we look at Appendix B, again, this is for information, and this is for 1 month in April. It doesn't cover anything. It's a fraction or a snapshot, and I don't think too much should necessarily be taken from that, because it may well have all changed in May.
I think there are 2 points to the task in front of us. One is to be confident that the data with which we are being presented is of a type that allows us to make the decision that the audit committee would like us to make. Do we think this data, if it is all showing the correct figures, and at the moment it obviously looks very good, there are lots of ticks in it. Does this data allow us to make a judgment? In other words, are these sufficient indicators to allow us to do this? And if they are sufficient, does that then mean that we can look at this and say, yes, given the data in front of us, we are confident about the performance of the council?
I'm just going to ask Jim a question. Jim's going to come in and answer the question I've just asked him: is who sets the performance indicators, and do we have the control to change them?
And Lee will correct me, I'm sure, if I get this wrong. But I mean, broadly speaking, the portfolio holders are the people responsible for the performance indicators within their areas. Clearly, I think possibly just going to Councillor Skinner's point, that irrespective of the performance indicators here, the question that I'm kind of hearing from Councillor Skinner is, are these the right ones for this committee, let alone the portfolio holders, but for this committee to give themselves the confidence that the council is performing in the right way in the right places? That may well come down to whether the targets on these performance indicators are correct. It could come down to actually portfolio holders are interested in this, so we're measuring that, but the Scrutiny Committee would like to see something else. The difficulty there clearly would be we don't have an endless amount of resource to sort of slice that particular cake in endless amount of ways. But yeah, I mean, this is, the indicators here are very much being presented as these are the indicators that officers work to, that portfolio holders are kind of responsible for, if that makes sense. If the Scrutiny Committee wishes to look at something else, that's within the gift of the Scrutiny Committee, and certainly between Lee and myself and other officers, we can try and do what we can.
Councillor Skinner, do you have a response, or Councillor Hogarth has a question as well?
It was Councillor Hogarth's question related to my question, because this is an area of Councillor Hogarth's expertise, so I'd be interested in hearing what he has to say.
It was a follow-on down the path, so if you want to conclude, please do.
Please, as I say, I'm very conscious of this scenario that Councillor Hogarth has a background and expertise in. So I'd like to hear what he's got.
So we'll ask Councillor Hogarth.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Skinner. My eye was drawn to the trend chart against each of the indicators, and I felt in terms of the activity of this Scrutiny Committee, the trend charts, we may need a little bit of explanation, which maybe Lee or someone else could provide just to see what they're supposed to show us. But if this scrutiny committee decides that one or two of the trends are of concern, then a future meeting of the scrutiny committee focus on that with the specific portfolio holder. I think the advisory committees cover the performance. We want to look at concerns about the future performance, which is what quite rightly Councillor Skinner has been concerned about. And we need to hold the portfolio holders to account on that. We must not, as a scrutiny committee, try to take over the running of the council.
Can I just say I agree with Councillor Hogarth?
You just did. so Councillor, I don't know, Councillor Robinson or Councillor Clayton, your hands both went up. Oh, you were agreeing, were you? So fine. I saw your hand went up, but I wasn't sure that was a question. So Councillor Robinson, do you have a question?
I do have a question, but I'd also like to start by saying I agree with Councillor Hogarth. So it's the agreement committee here. I like the fact that we get all the KPIs, and I appreciate that they're all pulled together, because it does give us, I think, as a scrutiny committee, a better idea of what portfolio holders are looking at. And in that sense, it is very informative. However, I also agree with Councillor Skinner that because it is a gathering of what portfolio holders want to know, what is missing is some of the indicators of, how shall I put it, the health and workings of the council as a whole, as a body. So there are things like, for example, one of them there talks about, it's on page 28, the number of working days lost to sickness. So that is one central HR indicator. But we keep talking about staff, and not just in particular areas, but staff is so important to us now, and it's something we keep talking about. I would like to have seen some more indicators about staff across the council. So what is the turnover? How many full-time employment positions are currently vacant? How many are being filled by agency workers? That is a global thing that is not by department, but gives us a global feeling for how are we? Can we do anything about it? No, it's not for us. That's for the leadership to deal with. But I think it's something I would like to see. And I think it might be worth, Chair, thinking in the future about some of these measures that give a global look at the council, things that are not specific to a particular topic or a particular portfolio holder. How many contracts were signed under 50,000? How many were finished on time when it was services provided? Do you see what I mean? How many disputes are there in terms of payment as percentage of number of contracts? It gives us a feeling for the oil and the workings of the council. And this ought to be, I hope it is, information that is available to the leader. I don't know, Councillor Hogarth would know much better than me what is and isn't given, but it's this stuff at the CEO leadership level I would like to see, but I don't think tonight is the time to discuss what it is. I would just like to say, I think there is a gap here that would be useful to scrutiny to consider in the next couple of years. And maybe we can get together at the next meeting.
When you say the next couple of years, we have 21 months.
Yes, exactly.
And then we cease to exist.
Yes.
So I have to beg the question is, whilst it's important for us to hold the account, everyone to to account, what are we looking to? We have to cut our say fabric, a cloth, with regards to the longevity that we have. And I'm mindful of again officer time to report that. We have tonight a set of a document with the performance indicators. I do have a specific question on that, and in the trend chart, which it doesn't say in the document, is what period does the trend chart cover? Is it for April, or does it cover What period does it cover? Because I have no idea.
Chairman, thank you. And yeah, I did make a note that Councillor Hogarth had made that exact same question. I was hoping to find an opportunity to come back in. The trend chart it just gives a kind of just a directional indication over the past 12-month period as to whether the indicator has moved. So not particularly, of course, not helpful at all in understanding individual data points, but it gives you just some sense of where that has been going. It is in relation to each indicator as described. So downwards doesn't always mean bad. Just so you just need to reference it back to the description. So to understand whether positive or negative is good.
Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. I completely appreciate your point of view, and thank you, Lee, for I'm trying to think of an analogy, and I think the analogy is our portfolio holders are the equivalent of specialists of a particular part of the body. One's the cardiologist and one's the orthopedic surgeon, whatever. I would like us to consider whether, through you, Chair, at another point, whether there are just a few indications that are the simple ones, like what's the general temperature of the body? Has it got a fever? Hasn't it got a fever? These very general, there are a few, I would say 4 or 5 indicators that we could have that give the general health of the council that are not under any portfolio holder, but that are important at the top leadership level. And I would very much appreciate time set aside at the next committee or a small working group to come and talk in October to look at what would be useful, because that information should not be a lot of work to find. It should be in the system. It's a question of printing it out and adding it.
If it exists,
I hope.
I have a question, if I can, in interrupting you there. In trying to answer that question, both of the officers, are there additional indicators which could be provided, which aren't being provided here, which would answer some of those questions?
Chairman, thank you. And I won't speak too heavily about HR directly because Jim will be in a better place to answer that as one of his responsibilities in our organisation. But HR does fall under a portfolio holder as well with Councillor Horde, I believe. But yes, there may be a simple answer to this, which is that we've heard what you said. I've made notes about this. I can go take this away, speak to officers in the first instance, see if we can just solve this and add it into our data set before the next reporting period. If that's not possible and you don't see what you are looking for at the next reporting deadline, then by all means, we'd be happy to hear your views further.
If I can, through you, Chair, the other thing that I would add to that is clearly from a senior management point of view, I have, for my areas, and HR is one of them, a significant amount of data at my fingertips to be able to give me a feel, as you are saying, as to where, in what services there are issues, where things are going well. The thing that I would caution from a member point of view is there's a reason why I'm an officer and you're a member, and there's a separation there between the operational and the strategic, the kind of overview that members have, and there is very much a kind of separation in those duties. So, and actually, I'm very grateful for the enthusiasm that Councillor Robinson has around these areas, but I would just caution about moving too far into the operational side of the council, which I believe was really Councillor Hogarth's point as well. So
I would like to completely reassure you, I'm not interested in commenting on the operational. That is not our decision. What I am interested in seeing the trend of where things are going at a macro level, not a micro level. Promise.
So I will come back to you, because one of the comments that I picked up that Councillor Hogarth said, which you agreed with on the floor, is that you don't want to run, I think the words were, you don't want to run the council, you want to scrutinise it. And there is a fine, well, it's not necessarily a fine line, but there is a line between the two. We're here to scrutinise, not to tell them how to run.
I completely agree, Chair. Everything that goes in front of Cabinet can be reviewed by scrutiny. It's as simple as that. If it doesn't go to Cabinet, if it's totally operational, then it doesn't need to come to scrutiny either. But I think it's just worth seeing if there is stuff that would be worth us encouraging discussion about.
We have asked the question and the officers will come back to us. In the meantime, Councillor Cole had a question, and then Councillor Skinner, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Obviously, these are high-level targets and KPIs, and I think I wouldn't like to see us 100% green, because then we're not really challenging ourselves enough. So it's a balancing act, isn't it, between trying to make sure that the reds are going to amber and green, and that greens aren't green because we're not challenging ourselves enough. Couple of things that I'd just like to point out, that I think we can always complain about things, which I have done in the past, but I think a couple of things I'd like to point out that I feel I'm very encouraged by. One particular one is the number of households in B&B, which is 0, which I think is a very good.
Could you point out the code references so it's easier to find them, and which page they're on?
HSA 04, page
Thank you.
27. Yes, that's 0. So I think that's something that we can celebrate. And I think if we want to take the temperature of the council as a whole and how we feel that staff are feeling, then 28, that's LPI LIC 0. No, not that one. Yes, 01. The average number of working days lost to sickness absence. So I've worked in large companies, small companies. I mean, the fact that our sickness levels are at 0.42, which is much lower than the target, which again is quite low. I think, you do see staff going off sick for stress, or if they're not happy with their working environment. So have that 0.42, I think is for me, that was one of my main indicators, that overall we've got a good, happy staff who are happy in their work. There may be some small areas within the council that are higher than that, and that's obviously for our officers to consider. There may be, as you said, the waste area may be a particular challenging area, but I think overall that figure is very reassuring for me.
Good, thank you. Councillor Skinner.
Yeah, thank you. I wasn't going to comment on this, but given that Councillor Cole has done, so I'm looking at the trend figures for sickness absence. Councillor Cole is obviously absolutely right about the figures for May. But if you look at the trend charts, that shows
April.
Sorry, I apologise. April. April. But if you look at the trend chart in terms of a slope looks slightly less good.
Jim's going to answer.
If I could be of use on that one, that's an indicator that's a cumulative measure over the course of a year, so it would always go in that direction.
That would be helpful. Anyway, that wasn't the point that I was going to make. I think what Jim was talking about in terms of making a distinction between operational and strategic is extremely important. And I think he's helped to clarify one of the concerns that I have with these indicators. These indicators are operational indicators. If we go down these indicators, most of these are operational indicators, which are absolutely appropriate for officers to be monitoring, and I would expect them to have these and indeed more. What I think Councillor Robinson was talking about was exactly that. How do we get hold of strategic indicators which allow us to get to get a feel for the overall health of the council? And I know that's not straightforward. I assume, however, that the Cabinet is at least as concerned as we are with understanding the overall health. I don't think the Cabinet could. Sorry, I shouldn't talk. I think it is difficult to get a figure for the overall health, feel for the overall health of the council by looking at what are essentially 50 operational targets.
And I'll come back to you on that. In being presented with these figures, I don't know that is necessarily the one of the intentions directly to provide the overall health of the council. That will be done elsewhere as well, and in addition to this.
which is exactly what we're looking for. So if it's being done elsewhere by somebody else, could we see what's happening elsewhere? So if you go back to the beginning of this debate, the audit committee, sorry, the auditors asked us to look at these. They said it's really important that we're looking at them. I think it's very helpful that we've had this debate, because I think what we're saying is, great, we've looked at these. We note that they are operational indicators. We applaud the fact that officers are taking great care with this, and we can identify particular issues where things are changing up or down. But we are saying that because they're operational indicators, they're not giving us the strategic insights that as councillors we ought to be looking for. I think Jim is absolutely right. Operational issues are not for us unless there's a major crisis, then they turn into a big problem.
I don't want to stop you speaking, but I think that in the future, if we look at potentially having this as a working group, because I don't see that we are going to solve this tonight. We don't have the data to solve this tonight. We don't, we don't have the officers here.
Very wise, Chair. Very
so
wise.
Not that I just want to move the conversation on, but we're going round and round in a circle.
Absolutely
right. And I'm looking to break the circle and move forward. But we can't form a working group tonight on this because it's not on the agenda. We do have, however, once we've gone through this item, another discussion on a working group. But what I'd like to do is close this item. I've already asked, we have to note it unless there are any major discrepancies which we refer to the cabinet. I'm not sure whether Tony's hand is going up in the air or not. It is.
Short point, Chairman. I mean, in my initial intervention, I said that most of this stuff's okay, but there are a couple where there are systemic problems, and it's systemic problems that I think councillors, well, right, are talking about. And the systemic problem appears to be retention. There is no indicator in this set for retention. There is for how happy people are. There's nothing here for retention. I'd just like to draw your attention to that and perhaps record it in the minutes as something that we ought to pay attention to. Thank you, Chair.
I note that. I'm sure that we can note that in the minutes. But then the question then is also, how do you record retention and how do you measure retention?
And council does it every month.
Or you can have turnover, but retention isn't. There's another figure that goes with it. It's staff turnover.
Every organisation that I've ever worked for has had these figures. They're really not a problem. And I'm sorry, and with the presence of an expert here anyway, with Jim. So,
do you want to?
If I can, yes, you're right. We have a way of measuring retention. Again, it's something that we can take away, in the overall spirit of this conversation. I'm sure Lee's got quite a lot of notes there as well to see. I mean, part of the issue here, if I can be candid for officers, is to be clear what members are asking for. So I think Councillor Haslam, the Chair's suggestion of another piece of work to look at this in a little more detail, I'm more than happy to go along with that. From my point of view, as always, we'd need to caveat that with officer capacity. But some of these measures, such as retention, we do have. Goes back to the earlier point around some of Councillor Robinson's comments. We have some of that information at a very granular level because it's a very operational detail that we wouldn't expect to be reporting back to members. But I'm sure there's a kind of middle ground there where we can provide information of use to members without straying too far into the operational.
So, Councillor Lindop, you had your hand up.
Yeah, very quickly. I'd just like to say, contrary to what my three colleagues on the right have said here, even if we got the figures on retention, whether they're good or bad, there wouldn't be much use, sadly, because of the looming LGR. So I don't really see the point in getting the figures on retention, sadly. Sorry, guys. Huh.
I think I don't want to answer for them, but I think that any figure that you can use to monitor what's going on in your business is useful. So I respect that, but I now note your comment. But going back to my question, that we need to note this, and if there are no major discrepancies, we can move on to the next item. Agreed. Thank you very much. The next item is an establishment of an in-depth scrutiny working group. However, we seem to be potentially at a dilemma here, in that we have the Secretary of, is it the Secretary of State? Whatever department has not yet that announcement. We don't know that necessarily happening. We don't know that there is no statutory change order yet. We don't know when it's going to happen. It may be in October or November. It may be better in some ways, and although I say this with a heavy, not necessarily a heavy heart, in that if we are looking at establishing a working group to review LGR, we have nothing to scrutinise until a decision has been made, and that is outside our control. However, it is for us as a committee to decide, and we need to, as it's on the agenda, we have an item to discuss about a in-depth working group for reviewing LGR. I personally am quite happy, if necessary, to defer it to the next meeting. However, we do need to debate this. Councillor Morgan, and then Skinner.
We're in this. Yeah. So would it not be worthwhile sorting out the working group, saying who's going to be on it, who's willing to be on it, and be ready to act as soon as we get Secretary of State's comments?
We potentially, yes. However, we need to set the terms of reference for the working group here tonight. And as we don't know, can we set the terms of reference for that tonight? Even in setting up the group membership, we also need to understand what the group is actually going to be discussing and providing a report on. So I think Councillor Robinson has her hand up, and then Clayton and Lindor. No.
Thank you, Chair. As the chair of the little working group we had on LGR, which last met, I reported to this committee back on the 12th of November. I mean, obviously, you know, the terrible loss of Councillor Kitchener, who was on the working group, meant that it folded because we could not continue. But we had some really good meetings, Councillor Ball, Councillor Clack, Councillor Kitchener and myself. And we did present to the committee last November some recommendations of what, you know, we came to some conclusions there. For those of you who weren't there, the three key takeaways were, it's a policy, local government reorganisation is a policy decision and not a financial one. It comes from policy, not financial evidence. We came to the conclusion that it's a process, not a goal. So there'll be no clear point at which it's complete, and it is going to be challenging. Even just being safe and legal on vesting day is a stretch target. It's the one we need, but that's it. And our third point is that local government reorganisation is not necessarily the same as devolution. And in fact, we were concerned that it risks actually undermining democracy in rural districts. So those are the conclusions we came to then. Because we couldn't go further, but we did write a point about the next steps, which we then didn't go on to do because of the loss of Councillor Kitchener. So we proposed that the working group continued with the following potential areas of focus, and this was not debated because we lost Councillor Kitchener, to review and share the lessons learnt for that Grant Thornton report, which is what started this in the first place, which had the lessons of the previous unitary authorities set up in 2019 and the lessons learned from there. And particularly to look at not that we're going to go into operational, but to recognise that aggregating the financials is one of the most difficult things. And we thought we'd prepare for any public consultation which will come, so that we could help help the council look at how they communicate with residents when the consultation comes, if there is a consultation. Well, it's now been and gone, hasn't it? And consider evidence on how to communicate with residents so that they understand what's going on. So there were various points in our little report, and also to acquire and compare some KPIs, not all 52, across the borough councils with whom we are told we will be merging, and maybe reach out to other scrutiny committees there to see if we could work with them. So these were just ideas that we were going to propose to, and but they're back from last November.
I wasn't sure when or how to interrupt you, but I should just interrupt you if I may. So I'm not all doom and gloom with regards to deferring to the next meeting. I do understand that there is one area from your report that you have highlighted, and what we do have to bear in mind here is that if the announcement is made by the Secretary of State and the statutory change order happens, there is going to be huge demands, additional demands on our officer time, which is already there anyway. However, what you have just said is that the communication with residents on the LGR and members and potentially town and parish councils is worthy of discussion. Would we like to set up a working group to review that, because communication in the changes for all of our residents and trying to inform them of what is happening and how it affects them and how things continue I do believe could be well worthy of a working party. Comment, please. Councillor Skinner.
Thank you. I think that would be worthwhile. I mean, I think that there are, so the consultation with residents, parish councils, town councils in the district, and also with councillors in this council, how they too will be consulted.
Continue.
Thank you. I'll start again. So I think that scrutinising the the Cabinet's plans for consultation with residents, with parish councils, town councils, and indeed with councillors in this chamber who are not part of the Cabinet would, I think, be very worthwhile, because I think that would be helpful. So I think that would work.
Yes. As you say, I think, as Councillor Morgan said, I think we need to be ready as soon as, or we need to start thinking anyway, as soon as the government announcement is made. And my understanding is that that is likely to be weeks rather than months. And I mean, what concerns me is that there has been very little member discussion in this council about what we would like to see in the afterlife. And very little discussion with our county colleagues, for example, who at local level or West Kent level are responsible for delivery of much more expensive services than ours. So I think the county council, councillors need to, and the county council as an organisation needs to be brought into the equation.
But we unfortunately we don't have responsibility. We can request it, but
no, we don't. We don't have responsibility for town and parish councils either. But I think talking to them is a good idea. Now, I hate to sound like the ancient mariner, but I was here in this chamber when there was a reasonable contingent of councillors who remembered the 1974 and were part of the 1974 local government reorganisation. And the thing which they were very keen to, I think, be proud of, was the way in which they approached the business of amalgamating a number of different organisations. And the the way in which they used sets of principles to guide its formation and the transition. I mean, two which stand out in my mind as having been particularly stressed were the principle that the level of service provided to residents should be the same across the new authority. Now, at the moment, we know that is not true because they're separate authorities with their own methods of determining what sort of effective.
Can I interrupt
And
you?
the second was that they should adopt the best practice of wherever the authority was. So we'll just go. So
No, so what I want to do is bring the conversation back to the formation of a working group.
yeah,
Because the specific question that I asked was, but there is a topic potentially coming out of what Councillor Robinson shared with us, which was a leftover, or let's say it was a recommendation from the last working group with that highlights there is a need for communications with residents on LGR and members who then discuss and feed out to the town and parish councils. Is that something that we want to form a working group for? Now, for me, the answer is either yes or no. It's not a long-wind, no disrespect to your good self, but it's either yes or no.
yeah.
So,
Well, the answer is yes, but what the hell are we going to say to them?
well, that's what the working group is there for, to understand the communication which has been going on with regards to maybe the first wave, not necessarily the Grant Thornton report of 2017-18 or the Grant Thornton report of 2024, because there has been significant changes since then, is to work out what's been going on with the first wave that has gone on with the what was the reference to the first paced ones, or the ones that have just happened. Potentially looking at that and seeing how we can make recommendations, well, not necessarily recommendations, scrutinize how that is working, and then feed it back to here back in October. That is the question. And then it is a yes or no for me to move the conversation on. Then when we have a yes, if that is the topic, we can then look at the members of the working group. So I'll put it to you. Do you want to form a working group for the communication with working group to discuss produce a report on communication with residents on LGR and through members with town and parish councils? And those who are in favour of, and those who are against. So I think that was carried. So who wants to be a member of the working group? And they should be should be proportional to the membership of the committee. And we are now looking for volunteers, please.
Yeah, I would be happy to volunteer on behalf of the Liberal Democrats. My problem is I have, it depends on the timing, because I have personal caring commitments in 2 countries with a large stretch of water between them. So
I think that the timing is for the 22nd October.
okay, I should be able to get something.
But
I'd be very happy.
There certainly needs to be a report back by then. But I think that ideally report, but certainly a verbal update at the worst case, but a firm report by the second meeting, by the next meeting, which will be the 2nd of February, if the date, and I think the date is correct. But then who else wants to be a member of the working group?
I'm not sure I can do communication. I can do chatting, but I'm not sure about communication.
Councillor Morgan will be will be party to it. I can't commit any time, unfortunately. Does anyone else want to? I don't know why I'm looking over there. But how many people do we need? 3 people? 3 is a good number. Unfortunately, Councillor Clack isn't here. Can we nominate Councillor Clack even though he's not here?
It's on the last working group. It's very,
and it's not.
It was very good because of his other commitments and jobs. He was really helpful on the working group. So could we just put this to one side and agree to ask him if he would be part of it. I think his contribution would be very valuable.
I have a funny feeling that we need to agree the membership at the meeting tonight because it needs to be recorded on public record. Jim says we can probably ask him.
I think Councillor Clack's expertise in this area would be enormously helpful. So I would support Councillor Robinson's recommendation.
So Jim will come through me.
So, sorry, through you, Chair. If that's the direction that members of the committee want to go in, I'm sure we can communicate with Councillor Clack after this meeting. If Councillor Clack doesn't wish to be or doesn't have the time or the capacity to be involved, we can come back through the chair and to the committee and just look for an alternative volunteer if that helps just to move things along.
Councillor Cole, was that a hand movement saying that you would volunteer?
No, I would say it's more of a question. So what exactly do we want to communicate with the parish and town councils?
No,
Or because I mean, I'm a parish clerk, and we have already had lots of conversations with Calc on this issue. So I think at the moment, I think the parish councils probably are as far forward knowledgeably. So I think it's really, is it the relationship with
that's just
the district council and parish councils, or what is it that we want to get out of this?
So the question it's communication with residents primarily through members and town and parish councils to educate what is what is changing, and it's to review and scrutinise what has happened elsewhere in the last 12 months and then report back. And Calc hasn't gone through this because Calc, we're nowhere in Kent, has gone through LGR. So that's where I think there's a slight. I respect what you're saying, but I think there's a difference there. Councillor Clayton and then Councillor Robinson.
Yeah, well, I think you need to, with respect, Calc may not have gone through this, but NALC certainly has, and the links between the county associations are quite strong. So people do know what's going on next door.
I know, I thought that's totally noted, but I was specifically talking about Calc.
Yeah.
So,
but and I think we need to recognise that communication is not one way. We, I think, need to get some feel from other bits of the local government system of what the principles should be as we move forward.
The principles of what specifically?
What are the principles? What will we go like we did in the last local government reorganisation for the principle of equal service to all? Will we go for the principle of adopting the best practice of the constituent authorities? And there are various other things about financial viability.
We're not actually looking at the delivery of services through this working group.
Principles, I said.
Oh,
principles.
Principles.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what are the principles that we would look for as residents and authorities in Sevenoaks District in the new authority? Yeah.
Okay. So, Councillor Skinner.
Yes, I think maybe I can help. Look, we're looking at the biggest change in local government for 50 years, and it's going to affect the lives of residents significantly. It's going to affect in terms of waste, it's going to affect in terms of planning, in terms of housing, in terms of a whole range of issues, the whole gamut of what it is that we do. And it is going to be extremely important that residents understand what is going to happen to their day-to-day lives as a consequence of the changes that are taking place. I think Councillor Clayton's point about principles is important because that helps people to understand what they can expect. So are people in West Kent going to have different levels of standards, different levels of services because they live in Sevenoaks or because they live in Tunbridge Wells? Is it going to be the same? Is it going to be different? You and I don't know the answer to that, but it's really important that an aspiration, at least, is communicated. I think, therefore, it's a really good idea that this scrutiny committee scrutinises what it is that the Cabinet is going to be doing by way of communication with residents about the biggest changes in local government in 50 years. I think that's essential. So I have no hesitation about this, these terms of reference at all. Thank you.
I think Lee wants to contribute from the conversation.
Chair, I think Councillor Skinner has brought it to a good place. Just the reference to principles is absolutely a fair one. What is becoming increasingly evident is that is a job not for us, but for the shadow authority. It will be those elected members, as Councillor Clayton sets out. In 1974, he was on this side of the chamber taking control of things being created from existing organisations. He was building the new. It is the people that build the new that take responsibility for those decisions, and those will be the elected members of the shadow authority. The work that will be done between now and the elections will be highly technical. It will be some of the basic principles that a joint committee is empowered to do in terms of constitutions, preparing things for the shadow authority to adopt. It will be for the shadow authority to determine how that new organisation is built, and it will be for them to decide how it wishes to structure its standards and its principles. And that's something that we're all grappling with at the moment, because we absolutely all understand that we all have a very heavily vested interest in continuing the very best of what we've all given a lot of time and energy for as officers or councillors into the new future. But it won't be our decision.
Thank you, Lee. And I want to just bring that back. So we've what we're discussing at the moment, believe it or not, is the membership of the working party or the working group. So we have Councillor Robinson, Councillor Morgan and Councillor Clack, which we will then look to confirm after the meeting. If not, I will then come back to you. And all we have to do now is agree on that. Do we need to show of hands?
I'm really sorry, Chair, I hope I don't
sorry,
disturb, but I don't
Sandra,
think I can take this on before October. I just, yeah, I've got a 9 to 5.
No, that's noted, but that's fine. So
it's on the terms of reference, but
Mhm.
I am very anxious that if I'm going to commit to this, I want to do a proper job. And between now and October, it's going to be very difficult for me.
Are you saying that you're no longer able to be part of the working?
If you can give me 2 minutes just to talk to my colleagues to see, it depends on the burden of work before the next meeting. So to me, what's crucial is what are the terms of reference of this working group between now and the 22nd of October? That will make all the difference. So I'm very happy to take advice from my colleagues.
So just before you do,
Yes, thank you, Chair. I know these are supposed to be short-term focus groups. So I think the problem with LGR is that there's a year until we really know until we've sort of ironed out everything and we come to the point where we start with the shadow authority. So I think communication with residents is not going to happen sooner. It's going to be more, I would say, nearer the time that elections start happening and people need to start understanding what they're voting for. I would say, I mean, even something like contacting the Surrey councils, which are our near neighbours, to get a view on how it's going, how they're coping, what are their pitfalls, would be a very good, I think, a very good scrutiny working group. But again, that is something that is going to be staged through, they'll have some pitfalls now, then they'll find some more pitfalls, which they'll iron out later on. And then they'll get to the end of April and they'll say, well, that was everything that the pitfalls that they saw these pitfalls, but these are the ones that actually happened. And this is how we dealt with them. So again, all these things are to me, they're a long burn. They're nothing with LGR can be done in a short term. It's something that's an ongoing process, in my view. So I'm not quite sure what we're going to be successful in a couple of months to sort of really come up with.
And I think that's why, if I haven't communicated or shared this in the direct forms I'm doing now, in that what we're looking at doing is creating a working group to scrutinise how the fast track authorities have done it to date. within this year. We're not looking at anything else other than that. And then we're looking at coming back to the committee on the 22nd of October. So Sandra can live with that. Kathy, are you happy to live with that? And then we can go and speak to Councillor Clack, and if he can live with that, that's great. If you're all happy with that, I think that closes that item. And if we've closed that item, the last item on the agenda is the work plan. So, and the work plan, there is a typo, I think, on it because it's the 22nd of October, not the 2nd of October. Jim, do you want to lead through this, please?
Sorry, yes, thank you, Chair. So yes, as the Chairman points out, the next meeting is on 22nd of October. I think at previous members' request, we were looking at inviting Network Rail along to that meeting as an external invitee. Obviously, we have a rolling programme of portfolio holders who we will contact. I believe the next two, certainly Councillor Roy, I think, is portfolio holder for Cleaner and Greener. And then it may well be, I'll have to check, it's either Councillor Thornton or Councillor Williams in terms of that schedule, followed by Councillor Dybel. And then I think that leads us to April with Councillor Cole and Councillor Horwood to go around that cycle again. From the discussion that we've just had, obviously, we will look to see the report from the In-Depth Scrutiny Working Group coming back to the 22nd of October meeting as well. So hopefully that fills it. Oh, sorry, as it says on the work plan, Kent Police as well. There's a requirement for the committee to look at Kent Police around about once a year, so they're penciled in for the February meeting.
Do we need to add a working group for the October meeting? We discussed earlier with regards to, excuse me, the
sorry, Chair, through you. I'm open to the committee as to how that would like to be done. We have the performance monitoring as a standing item on the agenda for the for all of the committees. So that will be coming back on the 22nd of October. We can endeavour to look at some of the information that's been requested today, but obviously that will give members the ability to look at that in slightly more detail. In any case, it's there as an agenda item, so it can be expanded on. I would just probably look to be a little cautious on how long that agenda might get with an external invitee, 2 portfolio holders, something a little more in depth around performance monitoring, and the report back from the In-Depth Scrutiny Working Group. It may be, as the committee's done before, that you wish to perhaps reduce the portfolio holders to 1 or to move something to a later date, external invitee to a later date, for example, but I'll leave that to the committee.
So that is the plan, working plan. If you're all happy with that, are there any questions on that? Because that will be then noted, it will be in the minutes. I would follow that up by just saying that I know we were ruining the lack of a portfolio holder today, but I look at the clock, which is now 21:18, and there has been considerable debate and discussion in quite depth. And had we had them as well, I hate to think what time we would still be here tonight. But otherwise,
but we enjoy our council business.
Sorry?
Chair, we enjoy our council business, Chair.
Absolutely.
We'd be perfectly happy to keep going for several hours more. That's really not a problem. It's a joy.
Of course. But otherwise, I will thank you all for an engaging evening.